Well, hello and welcome to the third part of my session about the influence of higher education on chaplaincy. And thank you so very much for joining me here. And I'm looking forward to answering some of your questions. The first question comes from Shadrach, and thank you for what you asked. You want to know about the relationship between the chaplain and the institution they're working in, and why institutions have their policies while chaplains have their doctrines. Can I elaborate more? And I think the important thing here is to explain the following. It's this triangular relationship which I mentioned in the talk. So there's the chaplain here and their relationship with God. And that doesn't really need to be too worried about, because our relationship with God is our relationship with God. What we also have, though, is the organisation and their relationship with God. And what the chaplain can do is look at how the organisation's relationship with the divine is going. This line here, they can look, they can see, and they can see what they do to help. But sometimes the organisation's perspective on things is different to the chaplain's. And when there's a clash between what the organisation is like in its policies and principles and what the chaplain's spirituality and Christian teaching or Muslim or Hindu teaching tells them, when there's a clash, this is hard. And that's why to be praying at all times and remain connected is important. But also when this dynamic between organisation and chaplain is tricky, then it's also encouraging to recognise that helps us build our solidarity with all the other people who are religious, who find a clash between their identity and the organisation, and those who are not religious, who find a clash between their identity and the organisation. When we find it hard, we learn what it's like for others as well. But we always remember our priority is this part of the triangle, and looking at that line and saying, how can we help improve the spiritual well-being of the members of the organisation? On to the next question, which comes from Brian. Well, he has 4 questions for me, in fact, and thank you so much for them. And what you would like to know is how chaplaincy services can be offered in higher education institutions, considering different structures of people, staff and students and needs. And I think this is really important for us to bear in mind, is that the way that universities are structured, they want to support good student learning opportunities and a good student experience. So to get to know the people who are helping with the student experience will help us provide a good chaplaincy service. And to get to know who's providing good care and support for the staff will also help us provide a good chaplaincy service. This means, though, at times we might need to be working in 2 different directions at once. And I would add a 3rd section to there, which is the support for the management of an organisation. They need a spiritual friend and a critical friend to advise them and to let them know how things are going and what is or isn't working. And sometimes there's nobody else that they can listen to apart from a chaplain who has a relatively neutral or independent position, or because of that triangular structure where the chaplain can stand a little apart and see what the relationship is like. What do I know? Brian also asks about prison chaplaincy. Well, I think the prison chaplain has the biggest tension because so often they have to be very much within the organisation and having to deliver what the organisation does, more so than maybe the chaplain who can be set more apart in a higher education setting. They are typically, at least from what I know in the UK, keeper of the keys, so they must lock the prisoners away, open up the prison cell at different times to speak with them. And also when they organise a chapel event, they know that that's a time when the prisoners who are wanting to have an opportunity for many different kinds of interactions, not just spiritual ones. And that can be a very challenging space to occupy. I think the strain on the chaplain in a prison is immense and can lead more quickly to burnout. So pray for your sisters and brothers who are serving in such settings, And if you're a prison chaplain and involved in law enforcement, I'll look out for how long you can sustain that kind of vocation, and be kind to yourself, because it's much harder to challenge law enforcement principles and policies. You've kind of got to join in entirely with that at the same time. For instance, as a Christian, to be able to say, I need to be there to be proclaiming liberty for the captives. But if the way law enforcement is carried out does not raise up the humanity of those who are imprisoned, then the tension is very hard for the chaplain to live with. Should a chaplain, Brian asks, as his third question, should a chaplain be only an ordained minister? I think the advantage is the swiftness with which an ordained person can work. But I mean, I'm a believer in the priesthood of all believers. Anybody can serve, but it's just that where we have a group of people who are clerical, who are religious ministers, they are more readily set apart and available for all the different kinds of tasks that are involved, including when there's bereavements and tragedies, when there maybe are funerals to take, or the more cheerful times of weddings of staff or of students. And so a chaplain who is ordained can cover all these duties all in one go, and maybe is less distracted by other cares or responsibilities. And it might be sometimes a religious minister can find other ways of funding themselves, because they will more readily get the support of a church organisation or another separate charity or organisation to help them carry out their duties. Finally, what is the significance, from Brian this is, finally from him, what's the significance of understanding the geography of the place? So let me clarify on this. You see, the geography is all the different departments and how each of those different departments operate and interact, both within themselves and with other sections of the organisation. Do things run smoothly, or are things more kind of like snagging or catching on each other? How do the staff feel in one section or area compared with the staff in the other? How is it for those who clean at the university or those who make the food? Do they feel valued? Is their contribution also recognised? Do they feel belonging to that institution gives them a good opportunity too? Learning what that is like, and learning who will listen to the chaplain and who's ready and open and receptive compared to those areas who are less interested or less receptive. Getting to know all that geography is what I think takes a good 4 years minimum, at least, and maybe more like 7, until we know the places where the doors are opening to us, and also the places where maybe the doors are sitting closed. The next question comes from another chaplain. I don't have their name, but they want to know what is the importance of a new chaplain knowing the historical background of the institution before providing or performing duties, and how to make good relationships between chaplain, management, staff and students for common good. This is an excellent question, as all of the questions are, but what really interests me here is that it's more on this topic of geography. The history of the place is very important to understand, and the dynamic with different groups of staff and with the students and with the management makes all the difference if you can see what is going on and what's going well and what's not functioning so well, the functions and the dysfunctions of the organisation, who is also working towards the common good, and maybe also which areas are not particularly helping the common good or inhibiting common good. Then the chaplain understands again what this relationship dynamic is between the organisation and the divine, and can comment. But understanding the geography means it helps the chaplain know when to comment and who to comment to. Because like I said in my talk, I don't think that there's many opportunities that you can take in any 1 year to make too many comments on too many topics, because otherwise it can lead to aggravation and experience of us as aggravating things rather than helping or supporting. So this is where it's really important to learn who our allies are and who will be supportive of us and who we can work with well to make a good contribution. Remembering that, maybe 5 doors are closed for us, places that people aren't really interested in, but let's not worry about that. Let's find the places where the doors are open and concentrate our energies there. It will change over time, and there may be some surprises in the future. My next question that has come to me in the final question is from Father Steve. In higher education institutions, there are cases whereby some lecturers influence the students who have been very spiritual to be atheistic, Steve says. How do you come in to help and assist such students as well as the lecturers to not cross their boundary? What's exciting about working with students yes. We will continue with this broadcast. I just paused because there was something going on with buffering, but that's fine because I'm going to carry on streaming because nobody's in the live stream. Nobody's in the live stream. This is for watching afterwards. In higher education institutions, there are cases where students are arriving from childhood and moving quickly from adolescence and into adulthood, and they're on steep learning curves on many topics. Not just the education topic, they're on a steep learning curve there, obviously, but in relation to social relationships, in relation to family, in connection to their families and how they want to relate adult to their parents rather than child to adult. They're learning different life skills, like maybe more taking responsibility for their finances and for cooking and catering, all these things they're learning about very fast. And they have to stop being the child and start to be the adult. And this happens in relation to their religion and their belief, their faith, their Christianity, their Muslim practice, their Hindu practice. They need to say, as an adult, how will I be in the world? And sometimes there can be a real crisis of faith. So when a lecturer comes along and offers a different perspective, whether it's atheist or agnostic, that can seem really quite compelling. Now, what's important for us to support the student is to help them recognize that even if the first different view they hear sounds exciting or attractive, that there may be a range of different options and different views that they can hear within the organization, or from a different book or from a different scholar. So to give them alternative points of view and show them that there are different voices to listen to, but also to help them as their crisis of faith occurs, recognizing that what they're doing is learning very quickly and wondering how to be an adult in relation to their belief and their faith, and having to start again. And that we can be patient and supportive with them, not criticize them for changing their views, and maybe be cautious not to criticize their lecturer, but to help place what their lecturer's views are in relation to other people's views who are also academic and lecturers who aren't atheists. That can help the student realize there's a range of options from which they can choose, and that now they need to choose as an adult, so whatever they choose will have to be different from their more childlike faith and childish faith that they had when they were younger. Now, of course, Jesus does call us to have a childlike faith even in adulthood, but we need to make sure that we are getting ready for adulthood and helping the students prepare to be full adults and reconsider how they will have that newer and somewhat changed relationship with the divine, because they'll want to re-experience that for themselves outside of the confines of the family environment where the parents were telling the child how they should be in relation to their faith. This is good work to do, and it's a good reminder to us all that we might face a crisis in our faith at any age, but the students often face that in that colossal transition as they come to university. So to remain patient and keep the long-term view in mind is all important. Well, thank you so much for listening to my answers to all these questions. I'm going to stop there and say thank you very much for and spending some time with me. And as to the Chaplains Conference in Malawi, I'm so sorry I couldn't come this time, but maybe when you have another conference, if there's any way that I can join in again, either by video or by some other means, I'll be only too delighted. Thank you very much indeed.